Hey guys, we're going to pull this old cooler off this roof and patch the resulting hole. This unit is old and leaking, so we're just going to take it apart and recycle the metal. Got the unit all out, and next up is to remove this boot. Getting this boot off is going to require getting the roof shingles off around it, so we can pull the roof shingles off first and then get the nails out and pull this boot up. I use a flat style crowbar to break the adhesive underneath each tile and lift them up from underneath. So we've got all the shingles off around this boot now, and it's a little confusing. So we have 2 layers of 3-tab shingles. So we took off the top layer, and that has exposed some screws here. So these screws right here, we'll just undo those, and we should be able to pry this boot off. And with that, the boot is off. Our next step is to remove the next layer of shingles and get this main boot off. We'll use the crowbar again to pry up all the shingles. And this main boot is more of a project. You can see it's actually the beginning of the ductwork for the whole house. And this house, we're going to switch over from this old broken cooler to a new mini split system. So all of this gets removed. Again, I use a flat pry bar to pull up each shingle, and I have to be really careful this time to not damage the underlayment below. So this next boot is kind of connected to the central duct system. So what I have to do is pry them apart. And I'm not worried about breaking this one because I'm going to remove it anyways. So I'm just going to pry these back, and I should be able to remove this boot. So now we have that boot off, and you can see the wood below. That's the deck of the roof. It's plywood, and you can see some of this black right here. That is the underlayment. So we're going to be careful with that. We'll be removing some of it, but we want to keep as much intact as we can and roll some new underlayment up underneath that. So last thing we have to do to get ready to pull everything off is to get this duct beginner. It's kind of a duct boot, they call it sometimes, or the start of our duct work. We're removing this. So now we're down below the roof. We're in the attic, and we're at the underside of that boot that we could see. This is the air conditioning duct coming through, and you can see it's totally worn out. It's 40 years old, and it's got to be replaced. So we're going to cut all this out. And while we're down here, we can see, we're also looking to see where the plywood is, because code wants us to replace a whole sheet of plywood, not just where the hole is, for safety. So you can see where that plywood is. I'm going to have to remove the shingles up above the roof to cut out one piece of plywood, and we can kind of see it down here, where that runs to, and try to get an understanding of what we're going to have to do up on the top side. All right, so there's one. I'm going to remove all of these flexible ducts so we can pull this main assembly out of here. All right, so we've removed all of those flexible ducts, and we should be able to now push these in and then pull the whole thing up through the roof. And with that, we've created the hole in the roof. Next up, we're going to have to remove enough shingles to pull out a whole piece of plywood. You can see here by these green marks, we've marked where the plywood is. This is one sheet of plywood on the roof, and now we've removed all the shingles in that area. And next step is to take this black underlayment and pull it all up right here where the sheet of plywood is. Let's take a look at this in detail. So this is the top edge now, and what I'm trying to do is get to the plywood edge. You can see it there. That's the top of this piece of plywood, and I don't want to remove much more above that if I can help it. I'm probably going to have to go ahead and remove another row of shingles to expose this some more, and then I can finish pulling up this underlayment here, all this black underlayment, and get that cleaned up. I use the edge of the plywood as a cutting guide, and it works pretty well to get all that underlayment off. Then I roll it up, and really it comes up pretty easily. So now we have one sheet of plywood exposed here, and the next step is to pull it out. And to do that, we'll notice that every time there is a roof truss, that's where it's attached. So you can see here's a nail, here's a nail. All the nails at each roof truss here have to be pulled out. So here's another set. We'll pull out all these nails, it'll be a bunch, and then we'll pull this sheet out of here. I use a hammer and a pry bar to get all of the nails out, and it's kind of rough because this board is 40 years old. I have to just dig in and grab out every single nail to get this piece of plywood out of here. All right, so I think we've got all the nails out of this 4x8 sheet of plywood. Now the exciting part. We'll see if we can get it out of the roof. Next up, we're going to plug a couple little holes that were here for the electrical. And these are small. They're not any safety issue. We don't have to remove a whole other sheet of plywood for these. So we will take care of these next. So we'll fix this hole right here by first putting a board. We'll cut the board just to fit between the roof trusses here and just snug it right into place. Then I'll use some clamps to hold it there for me. And then I'll screw it in with some exterior deck screws here. Alright, so we finished putting in this board here that goes between the roof trusses, and it's also underneath our hole. So here's the round hole, and it basically provides a back, so it's not just air underneath that. I'm going to fill this hole. I like to use epoxy. The stuff they sell at the home stores, to me, just isn't strong enough, so I like to get a two-part epoxy. So I've got part B and a part A epoxy here, and we'll mix these two together, and it's really strong to fill the hole. So I'm going to open both of these up. This one's a two-part equal mix epoxy, so it's brown and white, and we'll mix those two together. Once they are mixed, we'll put it into the hole. So I'm going to scoop out what I think is enough of the white right there. So there's the brown. Perfect. And so I will take these with a stick and I'm going to start to squish these together. Just have to work it good till the color is consistent. You want to leave anything not mixed because it won't cure. It's looking pretty good. We're almost there. Okay, now we're going to squish this down into the hole. So I'll take some on the stick here. Hold this back. Got to lift up some of the shingles here. Try to get that in there. All right, so it's kind of in the hole, and then I'm going to just use another stick here, small stick, to kind of just scrape it off, make it smooth. It cures for a while before you can sand it, so you want to get it as smooth as possible, so you really don't have to worry about sanding. Just get it nice and smooth from the get-go. That's pretty close. Just gonna use one final, just to get another stick. Lots of little scraps here to make this happen, because you can't really clean them off. It's got epoxy on it. Just smooth it out there. And it looks pretty good. So that hole is filled now, and you know, it's not perfect, but it's got the wood below it. That's strong, epoxy in the hole, and it's good. The other option is to replace a whole other sheet of plywood, but it's just a little hole, and I think that's gonna be plenty strong. So at this point, the hole is prepped. We filled these little holes and made sure everything is super clean. We don't want any nails or debris blocking the new plywood coming in. And I've also used this green tape you can see around the edges to show where each roof truss is, so it's easy to nail down the new piece of plywood. So using those tape marks that I set down before, I use a chalk line to show the center line of each truss. And then here I am using some wood deck screws. These are outdoor rated screws to attach the plywood to each truss. So big project milestone, we've got the plywood down. And the next step, I know so far we've only demolished or removed shingles right around this plywood. And that's to protect the underlayment below while we worked. Now I'm going to go back and take one more row out of shingles around the plywood because I want to put over new underlayment and it needs to overlap the existing underlayment. So I'm going to remove more shingles. So I use my flat bar again to get up underneath all the shingles to remove them, and I'm removing essentially one column of shingles. All right, so we've now removed more shingles on either end. We took them back a ways because we want to overlap the underlayment with the old underlayment. And the other thing we've done, you can see we've just got some shingles just sitting here, and that's because of the wind. The old underlayment tears really easily, so we want to keep it weighted down while we work. And then we've also got all of these shingles here loose. There's no nails or staples holding them down, so our underlayment can slip up underneath. And everything here has to overlap. So you can imagine here, if the underlayment came underneath the old underlayment, that would be bad. That would, let water, and we want the new underlayment to be on top of the old underlayment here, and the opposite here at the top. The new underlayment will slip under the old. So to accomplish all that, all these shingles have to be loose so we can slide the underlayment up underneath. So we start by rolling out some new underlayment, cutting it to size, and then we underlay it at the top and overlay it at the bottom. We cut it in a couple of sections to get it to fit on either side, and once we get it all tucked in, we like to use a little bit of sealant between the two and make sure those overlap. Then I throw in some orange cap nails to finish everything off and hold it down until we can add shingles. So we're doing this repair on a super old roof. These shingles might be 30, 40 years old. And then they came back with another layer on top of that that's maybe 15 or 20 years old. All 3-tab shingles. The problem is the major manufacturers have stopped manufacturing these 3-tab shingles as of the making of this video. And so what are we gonna do? We can find them. They're pretty darn expensive and they'll be different. They won't be from one of the major manufacturers. So to kind of fill this first layer in, what we're gonna do is use something a little controversial. This is just starter strip. It's a flat shingle used normally just to start your roof shingles. We're gonna use that to fill in that first layer of roofing shingles as a replacement. Now, this patch may not be for forever. I'm not worried about it at all. We're going to re-roof this whole roof later in the next 12 to 24 months. So after we do some other projects. So this is gonna be great for this project for right now. So I'm gonna layer the starter strip in here. Nice big shingle, and it's just gonna be my first layer as a replacement for that really old roof. That's my first layer right here. I keep going down the row and I use 4 nails per shingle. So when I get down to the last piece in the row, it's not gonna fit. They'll have to be cut. So measure it and then cut that length exactly. I like to use a straight edge because this piece wants to fit in just exactly on the ends, and then just fold it to finish that cut. Now that the first row's in, I run this blue chalk line to help me line up the second row. So here we go, we're partway down, putting down these starter strips, and we're just dovetailing them in here. They just go right in. Here's the old shingle, and then we start right into starter strip, old shingle, starter strip, and so on. They just dovetail right in there. And we'll just keep going until we've got this whole patch all done with starter strip. So we have just 2 rows left to go of shingles on matching this lower level of shingles. And what's cool about using the starter strip is we can just, they're nice and long, so you can go all the way up underneath here and set that where it needs to be. And then the next row, that would be a little bit too long, and so what these do is they just break right in half. Just fold them in half, they break right in half, and then I can do that next level just like that. And this is the edge I gotta be really careful of. It's not gonna leak out in the middle. It's gonna leak along this edge, all the edges where we have old shingles meeting new shingles. That's my biggest potential for leak. I'm also using some sealants. I like to use a rubberized wet patch here, and I'm really careful to check all these old shingles. Wherever I've pulled a nail out, I try to fill in that hole and just keep this as weather tight as possible. We want a leak-free roof. And I know we're going over that again with another layer of shingles, but taking extra care in these edges will keep us leak-free. This top row is definitely the trickiest. I have to fit every shingle in underneath the old shingles. And I didn't break these in half. In the end, I decided to just cut off just enough so I could fit maximum coverage, get it as far back under the existing shingles as I possibly could. So that's it for this first layer of shingles, and you can see it's dovetailed in here with those original shingles, and it's all set. Let's just take a look here. Not the right thing to do, but maybe it'll help somebody just kind of think outside the box. If you can't find 3-tab shingles and you've got 2 layers of roof, I'm just using this as a first layer. Now the next step is to come back on top with the actual top shingles, the final layer of shingles. If you only have 1 layer of shingles, then you'd be done at this point. If you put real shingles, obviously you would not want to use what we did here with this starter strip. You want to use actual shingles as your final layer, but we're about to start that final layer next. So let's talk shingles. We know that these 3 tabs are not being manufactured, so we have to get creative. Over here, we already did a roof patch a little while back, and the exact same thing, but we actually used 3-tab shingles that we bought online, and they are available, but they're quite expensive. The other issue with them is they're not the same size what the manufacturers made. These are from China, so you can see some kind of weirdness where they don't quite line up, and then had to do a lot of custom cutting here to kind of dovetail it in here at the end. So pretty expensive. This one patch, maybe $800 worth of shingles, so that's about the most expensive roofing you can do. But this faces the front of the house, so it made sense to maybe spend some money here and have it match better. So what are we gonna do in the back where optics aren't as important? We've got here solution that, again, it's the wrong thing to do, but we're trying not to break the bank. With this roof patch, we know we're gonna replace the roof in the next 12 to 24 months anyway. All it's gonna be ripped off later. We just want it leak proof and not worry about it for 12 to 24 months. So we've got this first layer down because we had 2 layers, old roof, new roof, shingles. We've got the starter strip as that first layer. I'm going to come back with hip and ridge shingles. And why is that? Because they're flat, they're not architectural, so they will also dovetail into the existing 3-tab roof. And we found a color that more or less matches close enough, and that's going to work. Now, what are some of the downsides of doing this? Obviously, it's not how the manufacturer intended us to use this, so there's no warranty here. There's zero backing from the manufacturer. The other issue is, you can see it's kind of reverse of what a shingle should be. This channel right here could hold water, and that could be really bad. So it's not the best installation, but we're not too worried here. This, what we've got here with the underlayment and all of this starter strip, that's already watertight, and with all the adhesive on, facing up on the starter strip, everything's gonna be locked down pretty tightly here. So, because we're doing 2 layers, I'm personally not concerned about this, but would love to hear what you guys think in the comments as, an option, an alternative to, to patching a 3-tab shingles, knowing that the manufacturers aren't really making these anymore. All of the roofing suppliers, local to me, just, they say they don't have them. It's not a thing anymore. If we zoom out, the right answer is to replace this roof, but we've got other projects to do, and our number 1 goal was to get rid of, up in the front, a smokestack, a chimney essentially, and back here, getting rid of that old swamp cooler. So getting these projects done is what led us to where we are today. So hope that logic makes sense and maybe helps somebody else who's struggling with something similar. And I'll put the link to those shingles, the 3 tabs that you can buy online, down below. So let's just jump right in. We're gonna now take these and start our first row here. And these are just gonna dovetail in. Just right up in here, we have to lift up this shingle and it slides in. Just like that. So that's all dovetailed in, and that's our first shingle here, and we'll continue on this row and then keep working our way up the roof. You can see I'm putting new shingles over old shingles on this first row only, and the old adhesive strip is now no longer going to be sticky. It's already used. We pulled the shingles off, so I'll use some roofing adhesive along here. So I'll use this next tile as my spacer. Just set that up, your next shingle, and so I'm going to add some adhesive along here to stick this shingle down. I don't want to go continuous. I want to leave some gaps so that if water does get back there, it has a place to weep out. So I kind of go along and then leave some gap. And then I like to fill in these original nail head areas also, just because it kind of pulled through over time. And so just kind of fill those in pretty good, and that should do it. Then I'm going to take this shingle, put it in place. I've already done my blue chalk line here. You can see faintly the blue chalk line. Put that in place and just kind of press it down. You can see this adhesive strip will help with the next layer of shingles, but this first one I have to glue it down manually. Now I'm going to add the nails now, and we want to do about 4 nails. They say minimum 4 nails per shingle, so I'm going to do 4, and I'm going to space them out approximately. Now you remember that we're cheating and using hip and ridge shingles. They're not really supposed to be used this way. Typically you tear them at these breaks, so I don't want to put a nail there, because I don't want to make it any more weak than it is. And we put them right here in this zone between the adhesive, and we don't want the nail to be exposed. Just kind of a narrow band where they can go. And the idea is that each nail will go through the shingle below and the shingle on top, so you're kind of double nailing each one. So we'll put those in. And that's it. That's a shingle installed. Okay, so we have all the shingles down. You can see it's dovetailed in here with the existing roof. And here is that final product. It's all set. So that's a wrap. Hope that helps somebody out there, and make it a great one.